What is up? What is up, everybody? Hope everybody's having a great day, whatever day you're going to be watching or listening to this. This is your host, your founder of Break Into the Future, Joshua Taylor. We got special guest today, a legend in the making at least, Nitin Gaur. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, great to connect with you, Joshua. And for the record, this is going to be the beginning of of the Independence Day weekend, the Fourth of July weekend. So
Yeah.
glad to be here with you. I couldn't find a better way to finish the weekend than talking to you and talking about what's in the store for all of us. So thanks for having me, and really glad to chat with you again.
Yes. I'm super pumped. I will let you intro yourself, but I have to do this. I was before we connected. Shout out to LinkedIn. When I looked you up, and for people who know and been following Breaking Crypto and following my journey into the crypto verse, Nitin is, let's say, he's a legend. His resume speaks for itself. He's on the advisory board for Stanford University, the Digital Currency Initiative. He is a founding CTO for IBM, their mobile payments and IBM Cloud. He's a founding director of the IBM Blockchain Labs and also the founding director of the IBM Digital Asset Labs. And he's the director of the IBM Financial Sciences and Digital Assets. What do you not do, big bro?
Hey, that's you're very kind, Joshua. But it all happened not at the same time in succession, of course. And
Yeah.
besides the title and the title inflation that's happening around us, there's a lot of scars and learnings behind it. So I'm thankful for my employer, again, IBM, to give me a chance to be able to drive and learn and push these things forward. I'm also thankful for the ecosystem. But my current capacity, I serve as Director of Financial Sciences and Digital Assets. And all these happened, besides the titling, I think it all happened in succession where, you started with mobile payments and you realized that blockchain was emerging. This is early 2012 days. And then I had to convince our execs to invest into blockchain as a transaction system.
Mm-hmm.
That led to leading the blockchain labs. And because you're founding that whole thing, you have to then build an ecosystem around it inside of IBM and outside of IBM. And then you realize you're not doing the right things because you're solving for database problems. And then you said, okay, we need to bring the notion of digital assets. So you found another entity to focus on digital assets, to bring the focus of value movement as blockchain is meant for.
Mm.
So all this happened in succession. And
Mm.
because you're so tied to it and you sort of own it, you said, okay, I'm going to do this because it's an important part. And so that's the short end of that journey, as we put it.
Yeah. So you basically are incubating a startup inside of IBM.
Which is hard because you still are dealing with bureaucracies, you're still dealing with the big organizational structure, big decision making. But that's an attempt. So you're absolutely right. You start up this little thing and you get funding and you convince execs to say, we need to do this, it's important. And so that has been certainly interesting and painful at times too.
Yeah. What would you say were like the key learnings within this like almost 10-year experience? You're so early in the blockchain, like, today it's like a totally different world. Back then it's like we're just trying to get abreast of social networks and social media.
Right. So to me, a few things learning, right? I realized that most platforms, that's the platform of the Web 2.0 world, the Amazons and the eBays and the Baidu's of the world and social platforms, included, and platform of the Web 3.0, which is there's subtlety in differences, but the ecosystem and talent is incredibly important, which means you cannot go alone. I don't think there's any startup that can go alone and achieve it. I mean, you have to be a part of the ecosystem, which means there's a give to get. And many large corporations in our cohorts try to go all in or try to monetize this from being a platform from a software centric and so on and so forth. And I think that the power of ecosystem, which drives the power of network, and they're linked, right? The bigger your ecosystem is, which is providing the valuable services, providing the valuable asset classes, and providing valuable adjacent services, will attract more and more people because each ecosystem brings their own specialization as well as the populace to the network. Mm-hmm. And to me, I couldn't stress this enough that the future of Web 3.0 and everything resulting on top of it foundation being blockchain, and all the ecosystems, including the commercial ecosystem, the financial ecosystem, the retail ecosystem, the NFT ecosystem that's emerging, will rely upon this massive innovation that comes from the ecosystem. So to me, I've learned that the ecosystem is prime to the success of these networks. Second thing I learned is that for us to be able to get the right parties, especially in large corporations, because I represent the institutional side of the house, there's little motivation there's a understanding that they have to do something about it, but there's very little motivation for large corporations who have a business model, who are on the path of monetizing their previous investments into technology, invest to business model. Mm-hmm. And so you really have to work extra hard to say, look, these are disruptive technologies, disruptive business models, and you really have to work extra hard to convince the large corporations that you really need to pay attention to this, because this could either be transformative for your own business, or whatever is happening in this ecosystem-driven business model or platform-driven business model can be disruptive to where you are today. So think 10, 20 years from now, and that has been, again, a very interesting journey to convince a lot of business owners, because the motivation is simply not there sometimes. Yeah. And while there's curiosity, but it's really the motivation that drives funding, support, sponsorships, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Man, this is about to be a clinic. I'm going to say this every show. I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of questions for you, Nitin, but okay, 2 questions. What really, when was blockchain like a objective truth for you and a fact? This is factual. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then how did you get from that point to like, okay, I finally convinced IBM, this big, entity, to actually buy into blockchain, buy into what we're doing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a lot of history behind this. So let me explain to you, right? I was tasked with creating a strategy and a point of view as a CTO of IBM Mobile Payments. So this is pre-Apple Pay, and we've come a long way ever since. And so the idea was, how do you take the mobile revolution and make payment easier at retail level, peer-to-peer payments, sending money. This is pre-Venmo, pre-PayPal. PayPal was there, but PayPal was very limited in terms of what you could do from a PayPal perspective. Mm-hmm. And then I met about 65 different payment processors of the world. These are First Datas and Visas and MasterCards, in terms of trying to understand what role can our company play. Because one thing we've done really well since inception of our company is transaction systems. Like, if you look at what we have done from back in the day, from middleware systems and back office systems and in databases, these are all systems that facilitate today's transaction, whether it's insurance, financial services, retail, and so the question then became is, what is our role in that new emerging economy? And in every conversation that I went, the conversation of Bitcoin and blockchain came up. They either asked for my opinion, or they said, you should look into that technology in general. And at the time I knew about Bitcoin, didn't know, this is 2012. So I hunkered down for three months, went through every single YouTube video there is to watch, every single literature there is to watch. And of course, being IBM, we've had access to amazing talent in research and understanding consensus, why you need consensus, state machines, all the technical thing that makes this happen. And then it clicked one day to say, it is not just about Bitcoin as a fad. It's the underlying technology that makes this so powerful in terms of lending its tenants to transparency and to immutability and all the trust systems that it can facilitate. Mm-hmm. And so learning from that, to me, it was like, this is the next era of what, and we thought about this back in the day, that information made amazing things. It made egalitarian access to education, egalitarian access to newer business model, access via email and truly connecting the world in good ways and bad ways. Yeah. Now that information is moving faster, so is misinformation, and that's having its own consequences. And then that leads to the next phase is saying, what the internet was never designed for moving value. And we've had layers and layers of element on those things to be able to do banking, to buy airline tickets, to buy things online. And that has created a massive web of vulnerabilities, which is what we begin to manifest now with, hackers hacking the systems and everything else. It clicked to say, this is really something which is transformational to bring the new era of web and take the internet to truly globalizing the movement of banking, because cross-border payments back in the day and cross-border movement of value is still a huge challenge. And so my selling point to some of our execs, and I think one thing good about my employer, regardless of the fact that we're not in mainstream anymore because we don't make video games and we don't make, but we're still essential technology behind the scenes where you get your day in the court and you get to make your case to some senior execs and you get sponsorship. It's a process like any large corporation. Mm-hmm. And my selling point was, if blockchain is the next generation of transactional system, which it is, at the heart of it, blockchain provides transaction systems, then it's as disruptive to us, because one thing IBM does really well, which is our legacy and our history, is transaction systems. Mm-hmm. And so it's as disruptive to our technology base as it is to financial systems and payment companies and banks. And that's why we should invest in understanding it. And it took me some time, but I think we went forwarding in terms of making the investment and going to the market and having a perspective and point of view on that. So that's a journey in short.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, that journey. I would say IBM is a leader in the blockchain space, and kudos to your efforts over the past almost a decade. But when I started to research blockchain, even in 2017, 18, when I first heard about it, like really, 2016 is the first time I heard about it, but like we all have that story where we just kind of,
sure.
I don't know. That's when I was working to attempt to get in a hedge fund, and right. I should have paid attention, but who cares? Perfect time is now. But yeah, I think like IBM has been a leader in terms of big enterprise for years now, leading that charge. Can you talk about like blockchain from an enterprise perspective, like a B2B, for business to business, for all the listeners? We want to educate people here. This is for the 99% about all things future. So business to business versus like business to consumer.
Yeah.
Right? Like what has been the difference for you?
No, absolutely. I'll tell you this, IBM has been leader in technology for enterprises, but unfortunately, despite our attempts, only because of our strategic priority in large corporation, and that's true for most, our cohorts. There's a whole emerging decentralized financing, Web 3.0, NFT space, which is purely consumer to consumer driven. So the whole peer to peer, and we are sort of noticeably absent in the space. And the reason for that is we are, as a corporation, we serve the enterprise. Business to business has been our sort of focus. And so you can't be dominating in every area, every place, because that doesn't simply, make sense from a perspective of strategic focus.
Yeah.
And so when I launched the Blockchain Labs, the intent was to create this process from soup to nuts from our client base, which is large retailers and institutions and insurance companies and banks, to understand the technology and create a path for them to adopt and adapt, whether you're going after transformation power of the technology, which is basically flattening the business process and making things better, digitizing the existing paper-driven processes that are trapped in many. There are still a lot of trade logistics and trade finance, which is still trapped in paper-driven processes, simply because of the lack of trust in the fragmented ecosystem that's global.
Yeah.
And so we said we can create a business network and sort of, encipher these paper-driven documents, not just digitize them, which is conversion of PDF, but encipher them to a point where no matter who accepts it, the ecosystem has a workflow that has a trust built into it. So people are not carrying the documents, flying over literally with the shipping, for example. And we took the same model for food supply chain and drug supply chain and said, we can transform the manufacturing base and including financial services, which was laden with inefficiencies and intermediaries. And every time you have inefficiencies, intermediaries, the issue of what I call as time and trust as two constructs. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of seepage of sort of efficient capital, and in many cases the capital is either locked or capital is not utilized efficiently because of the inefficiency in the system.
Yeah.
And so from an enterprise perspective, that has been our focus, to say, let's remove inefficiencies. What today is a fragmented ecosystem of business process management that's trapped in every enterprise, because the world exists. There's a B2B networks, there's business happening between enterprises, whether it's small and mid enterprise or large enterprises. And the question then became if they can put them on the same network can we not leverage the power of blockchain to reduce the processing time as the assets, whether these are digital assets in form of documents or digital asset in form of workflows, move from one enterprise to another enterprise. And there's a visibility, a certain sense of visibility that allows the enterprise to be able to coordinate and make that process efficient. And there's a lot of cost takeout business cases and cost of compliance business cases that we have uncovered. But many of those use cases are remotely, I would say, differentiated from the crypto use cases, which is completely new asset classes, completely new business models. And so there's a whole dichotomy of the stream the enterprise is on and trying to use the technology versus the truly decentralized world or the crypto world. And we begin to then talk about the divide between how do you bridge the gap between the two. And that's an interesting journey on its own, but I'll stop at that, Josh.
Would that be another episode?
That'll be another episode. I think that I've been talking about this for quite some time, that divide will eventually close, just like the internet had created a divide back in the day. And it took us almost 2 decades to close the divide. Like if you look at Amazon platform or Baidu platform or any of the e-commerce platforms is an amazing result of 20 years worth of sort of workflow designed by a single platform. And, truly you have, if not hundreds of thousands of millions of companies who are on Amazon platform that me and you don't even know about. And they all are working in tandem the moment you place an order, for example, right?
Crazy.
So
networks, large. Yeah. So I want to go down that road in terms of public and private blockchains.
Sure.
But I probably won't.
You should. I'm telling you, it's your show. You have the flexibility.
Yeah, I want to talk about, because you're saying, is that what you're referring to, right? Like a public chain, right, and a public private chain. But first, how, in terms of enterprise getting on the blockchain, right? Like a Walmart, like these various stores, big enterprise stores and different businesses, how many companies are using these, like in the Fortune 500 or the Fortune 1000, Russell 2000?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, there's at least some project, at least in, let's say, Fortune 500 or Fortune 100, there's at least a blockchain project somewhere in the corner of the enterprise. And you can pick healthcare, you can pick retail, you can put manufacturing or supply chain. At the end of the day, any of the Fortune 100 is dealing with some level of supply chain, whether the supply chain is dealing with trade, supply chain, or even financial supply chain. So the whole notion of moving money and moving assets is also a supply chain of payments in general. So there's some project somewhere in some form, whether it's a POC or MVP or minimum viable network type stuff.
Yeah.
Or there is a avenue for the Fortune 100, in case some Fortune 500, to make investment into these crypto custodians, for example, or going after any of the entities who are in this permissionless world, because that represents a new growth opportunity. And no one wants to really miss the boat and have to have some perspective, some investment, some project from that point of view.
Yeah. So you would say, oh, sorry.
Yeah. And I draw the analogy between the early days of internet. When we had internet, we began to send emails. And you may be too young for it, Josh, and I was still in college, so we're dating ourselves at the moment. But the idea there is that maybe, with your youth, you may not have seen the pain points, but email was a cool thing back in the day. And sending attachment became even more cooler. Like, wow, we can send attachment with this email. And then businesses begin to look into this from a perspective of, so we had internet. And then we figured, can we build a fence around the internet to create intranet? And so every enterprise had the intranet. And we said, if we have intranets across the globe of a truly global company, can we not connect them through virtual private connections or VPCs and VPNs, for example?
I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Right. And so the thing is that internet was a global utility, a single network, but you had all these ecosystems in form of either virtual private networks or ecosystems emerging. And we found a way to connect them and found a way to layer them. And then you had this HTTPS born, TLS born, we're comfortable banking. And so it took a while for us to get used to the whole element. And I find that same synergy, and I wrote about this a while back, is comparing the protocol evolution with blockchain world in the internet era to blockchain with the next, Web 3.0 era, is that you'll have many public utilities and you'll have many fungible, non-fungible assets in the network. And it all depends on the consumer demand and the demand of the enterprises. That if I'm a banking consumer, and today it's happening through fragmented nature of things, I have to have a Coinbase account. I connect Coinbase as a regulated entity to my bank account, and that allows me to then participate in this ecosystem.
A lot of steps.
Right, a lot of steps, but eventually you'll find an avenue, just like we have seen back in the day with these fragmented ecosystems and VPNs, to quietly connect and truly have an avenue to move information around the globe. You can imagine something similar where I can move value around the globe with, with embedded trust and much reduced cost, because no longer I'm sending reams and reams of paper with shipping containers, which may take some time back in the day, pre-internet. And it's sped up our productivity certainly now, because we could work 24/7, with a global workforce. Wow. That's how I envision this evolution of this space. Is extrapolating this, but the challenge is figuring out the trust and security elements that we need to address to plug the holes what Web 2.0 has exposed over time.
Yeah. Would you say COVID-19 was a huge catalyst of the supply chain inefficiencies and a lot of the things that blockchain has been working on, but like, oh, people are finally like, okay, maybe this is it?
No, that's a great question. I think that the crypto community has always celebrated any pandemic because it's a black swan event that completely throws off all the metrics and all the trends. So if you look at the financial industry, every industry has AI and they do modeling of things are happening, and suddenly COVID shows up and it throws off all those models. And crypto community is celebrating that to say, hey, we are digital natives, and we didn't really have to worry about this stuff because we were doing this crypto world. But I'll tell you this though. The issues that COVID surfaced around supply chains, from a perspective of the fact that we became very monocultured elements of saying, we need to have efficiencies, and there is sort of a balance, between what what we have looked into from a perspective of driving efficiency and having the right diversity. To be able to, have resiliency in the system. So there's always a dichotomy between, if you're super efficient, you're not resilient. Yeah. If you're super resilient, then you don't have the efficiency because, So the cool thing that crypto community demonstrated, I think, is finding the balance between staying efficient, but also staying resilient, finding different routes, different protocols, different, and that's where I think the fact that we don't have one blockchain to rule them all. To me, was a more resilient effort to say there are many ways to skin the cat, and what is the best way to move the asset, whether it's Ethereum network or bridging or Polkadots, or all this protocol provide that diversity that was trying to make the protocol efficient, but also provided a resiliency to the whole effort, which I think is a very innate characteristics of many of the protocols that are emerging, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
That's nice. That's awesome. Yeah, there's been a lot of development since 2017, 18. A lot more projects have not just popped up, but the developers have really come online. And when things get bad, I would say you get in the chain where you start to work and you start to really, there's been a lot of maturity in the space in terms of real projects, real use cases, and the crypto and just the blockchain in general has grown up a little bit. So that's really awesome. I know I haven't been in the space that long, but it's really exciting. What do you think in terms of being in that corporate world, like, is the biggest hurdle for a lot of corporations to get over right now? I mean, yeah, you have people testing it. Some corporations are getting their feet in the water, but probably a lot aren't really that concerned. What do you think, since you're really close to it?
So there are two things, right? The ability to take risks in the corporate world is very minimal, right? Because you're dealing with, and for all the right reasons, right? We have built the financial system that relies upon a lot of things that the world runs on today, like movement of money, ensuring that money is not used for nefarious purposes, anti-money laundering, know your customers, and on and on and on. So regulation generally is not a bad thing. It creates burden for the industry because the idea is to provide a resiliency in the system for for the bad actors to, and it creates administrative burden, and creates, the cost of compliance. And as a entity that supported the globe for such a long time and supports sort of especially large corporations who are involved, and any, whether supply chain or movement of money, these are all regulated activities which need reporting. And there's a lot of fraud in the system too. In spite of all the regulation, you begin to see there's always a loophole somewhere somebody exploits, and it comes to the surface. So we have to be extra careful that we're not sort of breaking down the order that we have in the world from a system that has been created.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not just the imagined order, as the author of *Sapien* talks about, but it's also the order that we have created, which there are rules of engagement in that system. Mm-hmm. Which I think many of the smaller companies are much more nimble, and they're able to have the luxury of taking the risk. One, because they're trying to disrupt the system and challenge the status quo, which is a great thing, but also they don't have much to lose, both from a reputation perspective and the fact that starting out, they always have an opportunity to, kill a project and start a new one without losing a lot of reputation, which large corporations like JPMC, Bank of America, IBM the world, or Fortune 100 companies typically may not have the luxury of that approach. Mm-hmm. So I think while the flexibility of being nimble and challenging the status quo and being a challenger in the space leads to a massive amount of innovation, you have to realize the position of the large corporations who are custodial of these various systems that run the infrastructure. We have to be a bit more careful because there's a lot riding on these systems.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance between the two, and I think the inability to take risk, and it's just systemic in nature, is something which I would say is a problem of any large corporation, any Fortune 100, Fortune 500 entities. And that's why you'll find many of the innovation projects or innovation labs or spin-offs or newcos are forming so they can provide the flexibility and nimbleness. Because in many cases, if you have to go through a legal approval for every decision, it's very hard to innovate, right? Because you're constrained by the system to do anything, which is good and bad. So you have to kind of pick your poison.
Yeah. The government police are out there. So I guess you keep touching on this. Hey, be innovative, but have a balanced approach, right? Yeah. I think crypto natives, cryptoverse was really very like, we're gonna shut down the system, financial crisis. We're tired of this. We're changing everything. But you're starting to see the corporations come in. You're starting to see institutional investors come in. You're starting to see the merging of the worlds and the commercialization a little bit, and kind of a balanced approach. Even my first week at Boson, like understanding like, okay, like we don't want to be like, we're taking down commerce. Like there's a balance play, like there's an art of war approach. That I guess that's what you're saying if I'm thinking right about it. And so we don't actually collapse the system because that would be painful to a lot of humans and we don't want to hurt a lot of humans and businesses. So yeah.
No, and you have a really good point there, Joshua, because if you think about it, any crisis, whether it's financial crisis or the 2008 crisis that we have, the global financial GFC, as it's popularly known, the reason why it's important to preserve that, because it's called a crisis because it impacts a lot of lives, it impacts a lot of livelihoods. And that magnitude has not yet absorbed by the crypto community. So there have been a lot of crises even in our community, the crypto community that we operate in. Yeah. At small scale, right? We've been having a bunch of thefts. People have lost keys. People have fake debts, because they're part of, exchange. That's a crisis. It didn't touch as many lives. So it is not termed crisis. But imagine if something like that were to happen at a global scale. And so I think, the industry itself is in the whole movement of Web 3.0, which is decentralizing trust and decentralizing the computes, the storage, the interconnect, which then is the foundation for whether it's NFT or fungible tokens and everything else, and creating a seamless model that it's well understood by every person who's on the network is the role of keys and role of custodies and humanizing those elements. Mm-hmm. And that's where the industry is heading. So I think this crisis in crypto world too, because of the scale, it's not yet a global crisis. And those crises happen day in, day out, as we see all the time, that somebody lost X amount of money, there's been some fraud happening, and that's a crisis too. It's a different crisis at the moment. And I think, to me, the industry is working towards plugging those holes. And once that's resilient and has the right technology, which is well understood, I'm pretty positive that the two worlds of decentralized and, the permissionless will converge, because who doesn't want a good tech, right? Who doesn't want to make the life easier?
Yeah, right. It's like, do you want to keep using just
travel agent? Maybe. I mean, who uses travel agent? Like, do you have a travel agent in your street sometime? And I travel the world, and I ask this question: who books the ticket to travel agent? And there are no travel agents anymore. Yeah. You go online and you book it, but you still have experiences. Like, you have Expedia, you have Trivago, you have all these things who provide the same service, but the focus of that service has changed. They're more focused towards your experience than simply buying your ticket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just transactional.
That's right.
Life is not a transaction. Relationships are not transactional.
Sure.
Some of them probably are for people, but I'd rather have great friends like you. So, right. Yeah. So why, for someone that's never heard of Web 3.0 or doesn't not informed, why is Web 3 important, and why do we need that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think
we're good, right?
I mean, look, you have internet today, and world is working. You can log on, check your bank balance. There's somebody responsible behind the scenes to make sure it works. You can go buy airline ticket, and day in, day out, there are vulnerabilities, and things get hacked. There's ransomware attacks that's happening, and so on and so forth. And the reason why Web 3.0 is important, and this is, so we had Web 1.0, which is the early days of internet, which connecting the ARPANET, and followed by ARPANET. And then you have Web 2.0, which is trying to bring the SOLOMO, which is social, locational, and mobile. So mobile evolution led to a seamless experience, whether you're on browser or your phone or wearables or anything of that nature. That was Web 2.0, essentially, is linking your digital life. It's all, the entire platform is evolved and developed on the protocol that was developed about 30, 40 years back, 73 onwards to 92. And we have focused more on scalability, ubiquity, access to networking, and so on and so forth. But I think the system that was designed for dissemination of information. And now when we talk about value, and I'm not just talking about assets, whether it's stocks, bonds, money, fiat, CBDC, I'm talking about everything that we value: information, truth, and things that you own, right? And so the thing is that the reason why you need Web 2.0, which is decentralizing these things, because you're not letting a single system be hacked, or a single platform being able to be used, whether maliciously, intentionally, or unintentionally, as a vehicle to spread disinformation, for example, because we value truth, we value information. And so Web 3.0, by decentralizing things, you're sort of, in all areas, you're decentralizing governance and not giving one entity a chance to take or to exploit the system, which is what's happening today. Mm-hmm. And that's why what Web 3.0 is trying to do is take away this notion and truly democratize movement of information, movement of things of value, and in build trust in the system, which will help us fuel the growth in the next era, for the next 50 to 100 years, allowing the betterment of how we live and how we consume information, how we make decisions, how we vote, how the democratic systems work. So it's really going towards the social systems, information systems, capital systems, financial systems, and that's a new platform that we envision, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Another question. What in terms of regulation, how do governments, how do they fit into the picture? How do governments fit into the picture, and what happens to governments? State-run governments, city-run local governments, and national governments. How does that work in a blockchain crypto world? And then what happens to businesses if they do not get on board?
Well, it's a loaded question. So few things, right? Again, if you read Sapien, it talked about imagined order, and that's been, since the evolution of our human history, we've had imagined order. We've had some order in the system, whether it's a small chief in a tribe, going to kings and nation states and villages. There's always this hierarchical order which helps us organize how we identify ourselves, where we live, what are the rules we live by. And so I don't think I share the view of a completely anarchist and libertarian model, only because we have come to a point, the scale of which we live. We need some order to organize ourselves and take organized actions. So that's one point. I don't subscribe to the completely libertarian model. I think we do need some order. Otherwise, things, from our normal survival and how we behave may become interesting to say the least. Second thing is, I'm not suggesting that. So these systems will help govern better. And I think once the systems emerge, you'll find that the reason why we have so much regulation now is to plug in the gaps of technology through policy. The reason why you're AML, KYC, you want people to report this stuff is because the technology doesn't let you do that because it's all fragmented and to an early model. Mm-hmm. I think governance becomes easier. The fraud detection becomes easier. The ability for you to do wrong things becomes harder because things are transparent. The ability for you to provide, to spread disinformation becomes harder because there's transparency in terms of origination of content, movement of content, and who spreads the content, and you can reward and penalize whether you're embedding them into your protocol or embedding them into ousting a certain parties or individuals from the network because there are rules of engagement. So even blockchain is not exactly, even though it promises a libertarian model, there are rules by which you operate, and the consensus is rules. Ethereum 2.0 is moving towards proof of stake. They have rules. It's an imagined order too. Like you have to behave in a certain way, otherwise you're slashed and your what you're staking sort of get reduced. So to me, I think Web 3.0 will drastically reduce the burden of regulation. You have much more transparent systems, which attracts capital, which attracts talent, which attracts best minds. So I think governance-wise, it becomes a lot more easier. And I think I'm pleasantly surprised. I work with a lot of regulators. That crypto space, you'll be surprised that the receptivity and the work from many regulators on the globe has been phenomenal. Mm-hmm. They're slow in moving because there are existing constraints that they have to operate in, but they have been very supportive in taking the step to understand the technology and move forward with having that meaningful regulation, because anything you pass has an impact on our lives because we do a few things around it. So yeah, that's where things are. So I'll pause at that to see if that made sense. That you need that imagine, or you need some of these things for it to function.
More balance. Free with some governance. Freedom with some governance.
True.
Yeah. I guess 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. In the holiday weekend, what is, if I am a teenager to young 20s and I'm hearing this I'm still a crypto baby, I'm a beginner blockchain baby, or I'm into my career, I'm older, or I'm middle-aged, what do I do? Where do I go from here, Nitin?
So I think that from a perspective of, it's never too late. Let's put it that way. So whether you're starting out, and I've seen many people who've come into this game super late, but they're brilliant in the thinking. I think having an open mind and being receptive is the first step. And, I've always joke about this. Our mind works best. Our mind's like a parachute. It works best when it's open.
Yeah.
And you have to have an open mindset to get in the space. It's never too late. But I also would say that, and this is the hardest thing I have to keep up. There's so much happening in the industry. It's practically impossible to know it all. So I would do 2 things. Get the basics. It's important. You can't just go all the way to layer 4 and so get the basics of what blockchain is and how it works. Pick your swim lane and just go in that swim lane and see where it goes. Maybe it's good for you. If not, it gives you the ability to switch a swim lane in the future. But you're building upon what you know.
Yeah.
Right. So start with basics, understand what the technology capabilities are, and not just from lingo perspective, but truly understand it. And pick a swim lane, whether it's NFT or DeFi. In DeFi, you have 100 different areas. pick a swim lane, understand it, see if it appeals to your senses, and if not, then pick something that you're naturally gifted with. We all have some interest, whether it be like healthcare, finance, NFT, basketball. Pick your poison
Yeah,
that you naturally love to do because you understand the space better,
exactly.
and go in that swim lane. And I'm pretty positive. I mean, you're a perfect example. I mean, you have tried so many things, and talking to you, you're a hedge fund guy, and I think what we see in DeFi now, it's the same era of what hedge fund used to be in 70s or 80s, for example, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolute alpha.
oh, that's right. Go for
Absolute
the alpha.
value. Yeah, yeah. What's your swim lane?
So my swim lane is finance. I'm a finance guy. I understand it. I actually enjoy it. I like the complexity. I think I also get the lingo, which is a hard part in finance in general. And I've been at the space for some time,
Purposely.
especially movement of money, movement of assets. I sort of begin to enjoy it,
Hmm.
and so that's my thing. And global finance becomes even more interesting now because suddenly you have flavors of finance, whether it's Islamic finance, which has its own rules,
Yeah.
whether the context of finance is different in Europe than it's for US. US dollar is a well reserve versus, let's say, you go to Kenya. So I think money ties our lives together, and money has a lot of context.
Hmm.
And that's why I think finance is interesting because it touches our lives in more ways than one. It's implicit in many cases.
Yeah.
And that to me is interesting. That's my poison.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Where since this is all about the future, where is the future for you? And then where are we moving in this next cycle for the blockchain and crypto?
So to me, I think maturity, right? You find so many protocols that are out there
Mm,
in terms of, you have suddenly now you have Dfinity has ICP, and you have Algorand, you have EOS, and you have, Ethereum moving from, and to me, that's all an evolutionary step. I do think, and this is something which I've written about too, that after almost a decade worth of 12 years after Bitcoin and almost the exponential growth since 2017 to now in the crypto world, it's time we reassess that and focus on the foundation. So if you look at for internet to really work, you have to lay out fiber cables and get the bandwidth down to start doing Netflix and doing. So now you have 5G, combined 5G, which is telco bandwidth versus. These are all. This is all basically foundational elements
yeah.
for the internet to truly be active. For you to be able to perform a surgery, you need to have the bandwidth to have real-time response times to be able to do these things. The promise of high bandwidth and
Yeah.
promise of Netflix, because Netflix started out, if you remember, maybe you're too young for that too,
Like 90s.
shipping out CDs.
Yeah,
Yeah, shipping out CDs, right? And so or DVDs, for example.
they're way ahead of
And
their time.
right. And the thing is, they started out that, but they did have the vision of going the internet route. But the bandwidth had reached a certain point, which we can enjoy Netflix, and they stopped shipping CDs and took the same customer base and moved them to online, which removed the whole order of shipping. But they first started with saying, you don't have to go to Blockbuster or go to your Redbox. You can ship it in your mail, and they build a network. And they had enough thing to make life easier for us. And they said, now you don't even have to go to the mailbox. You simply sign on your phone and in your devices, and you're done. So for that, you need to have infrastructure. And I think for crypto, NFT, and any flavor of the digital asset space and crypto asset space, Web 3.0 should be our focus. We need to build that infrastructure, the scaffolding that will support these asset classes. I think should be the next step.
Yeah. Nice. And what's next for you? What do you?
We're going to continue chipping away, man. I mean, it's like, there's no overnight success in these areas. Yes, you hear of overnight millionaires with Dogecoin and all these things, but for me, it's you chip away and solve one problem at a time, and you benefit from the industry. And all of us can't be Dogecoin billionaires, but we can try to benefit from the innovation that goes into it.
Yeah, you're the 10 years and then you cash out billionaire.
I don't know about that, but we can try.
Yeah, hey, whatever we're blessed with, but we want to break into the future. That's what it's all about. Thanks, Nitin. This was so dope. This was a clinic. Legend, IBM exec. He's a founder of so many things. I'm giving him praise. I thank you so much, man, for helping me and breaking the crypto into the future. Where can people follow you? Your writing?
LinkedIn is a perfect place to do. I write quite a bit, and I must say this, Joshua, that I think now known you for the few calls, and I think you have a bright future. And I think you've done a lot, and you've done, you're doing your part to involve the community and do your part. So I think I thank you for, for being that person too, because it takes a village, literally.
Yes, it takes all of us. Thank you. This is about helping the 99%, no matter where you come from,
Sure.
break into the future, blockchain, crypto, but everything, electric vehicles, 5G, solar, cannabis, psychedelics, everything, deep
Everything.
tech, IoT, AI, we can go poverty, everything.
Sure.
So yeah, for sure. We'll definitely have to talk again. We'll keep in.
Sounds good, Joshua. You enjoy your long weekend,
Yes.
and let's cherish what independence truly means. It's not barbecue and beer.
No.
It's more towards what we stand for as a nation, and in true sense, I think.
Yes, and we're fighting for it every day, and continuing to fulfill the Constitution, getting better.
That's true. Getting better. We take 4 steps ahead and 2 steps back, but we still, hopefully, as long as we're moving forward.
It's still the net two. It's net two, right? So we're only 250 years old, right? Like it's
that's right. That's right.
For sure. So, but have a great July 4th weekend, and we'll talk soon.
You too. Take care, Joshua.
Right,
bye.
Peace. Man, that was lit. Nitin Gaur. He could. I'm gonna put his stuff in the below and in the link. LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure he has Medium, or I'll find his information. So, IBM executive, founder of a lot of their digital assets and blockchain labs at IBM. He's a Texas guy, India as well. He's super cool. So check him out. Hey, we're breaking into the future, all things future. Let's get it. Joshua Taylor. Whenever you hear this, it'll be after July 4th, but I hope you had a great one. Love y'all. Let's go.